Okay, good morning, Shabbat Tov, everybody. Welcome back. So we are just about on the last daf of the Masechet. We're going to be finished soon. We'll have to think about what we're going to do and when we'll do the Siyam and how we'll do that and which Masechet we'll move on to next. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's finish off first. So let's go back slightly. The bottom of daf Kaf Gimel Amud Bet. Bottom of Kaf Gimel Amud Bet, we saw the very famous. I'll just remind you. Before that, we saw a couple of things in the Mishnah. Our Mishnah mentioned a number of statements of Agada, telling us about different mitzvot and about different reward for mitzvot. So the Mishnah told us that somebody who is Yoshev Batel, somebody who's just sitting and really not doing anything, in other words, refraining from performing a negative mitzvah, is going to get schar as if he had performed a mitzvah. You'll see at the top of the page, if we're on Kaf Gimel and Bet, at the top of the Amud, we've got our Mishnah, which we saw. It says, Asher yaseh otam adam v'chai b'hem, kol hayoshev v'lo avera notnim lo schar k'oseh mitzvah. Anybody who sits and does not refrains from transgressing an avera, is given reward as if they've done a mitzvah. And then we saw also the end of the Mishnah, the famous statement. I'm sure it's famous for all of you, right? Rabbi Kenigsberg Talmud that in order to give Bnei Israel extra merit, more schut, to refine them, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us many different mitzvot, and we explained different interpretations of that Mishnah. According to Ravana, means that we're given many mitzvot which we would have kept anyway, and we would have kept them anyway. So now, by the fact that we are not doing these things, so we actually get rewards. So some of the Farshim point out that it's actually double reward from the fact that the pasuk says Yagdir Torah v'yadir. It's two different things. That now we're getting the reward in terms of refraining from, in terms of not doing those actions, and you can learn about them. You can learn about them, study the parashiyot in the Torah, and that is going to be an extra reward you'll get for that, which we wouldn't have had otherwise. The Rambam, as we saw, understood it differently. The Rambam understood it that the point is you have lots of different things you have to do, and then maybe you'll get one of them right. Okay, but so this relates also to the Gemara that we see at the bottom here, so at the bottom of our Amud, about 4 lines from the end. We have 2 lines. It says, Darash Rabbi Simlai, 613 mitzvot ne'emru lo leMoshe. 365 להבין כמניין ימות החמה, 248 עשה כנגד איבריו של אדם. So this is the source for the famous idea that we have Tariag mitzvot. Says Rabbi Simlai, there are 613 mitzvot. 613 mitzvot given to Moshe. 365 lavim, 365 negative mitzvot, and 248 positive mitzvot. Okay, so there's an interesting piece here I want to share with you in the Aruch LaNer. Let me maybe put it up on the screen. Okay, so that's the Chashukei Chemed. We'll come back to that in a moment. This is an Aruch LaNer. So he says like this. Right, we saw one explanation in the Rivan. Why is it? We have 613 mitzvot. Why do we say there are 365 negative mitzvot, 248 positive mitzvot? So it says here the following. It says, B'Gemara, k'minyan yemot hachama, mashta le'alot taseh b'yamim v'asin b'evarim. Right, so we said that the negative mitzvot go according to the days of the year. There's the solar, as we explained in the last year. There are certain times in halacha where there is significance to the solar year in terms of working out the tkufot, working out the seasons. So it does have significance sometimes. We saw in our Mishnah at the beginning of the page that anybody who is sitting and is not over an avera, somebody who's just sitting and not transgressing, that's as if they performed the mitzvah. Right? They're going to get reward for that. So he says that is the fact that you have sat and not, could be standing. Okay, it's not literal, but the fact that you did not perform, you refrained from performing the lo taseh, that is a mitzvah. He says, So not all times are equal. Shemish yoshev batel shachat kshaya binyan shechol lachto en zchuto gadol kol kach. Right? Seems to be referring to a case, not just the fact that we're sitting here and not performing lo tirtzach. Okay, a person isn't really tempted to do certain things, but sometimes you're tempted to do something. You're tempted to speak lashon hara, whatever it is, and a person holds himself back. Right? I think that's the idea. Yeah, when it says that yoshevu batel ma'avera, that just necessarily happens automatically, but that a person makes the effort, but a person refrains from that transgression, even though they might be tempted to, even though there might be an opportunity to do it. So he says it's not going to be the same. Somebody, one moment, sha'ah, by the way, there's a ruchlaneh, so it's already here later, but the word sha'ah, when you find in Chazal as well. So what is the word sha'ah in modern Hebrew means an hour. Many times sha'ah does not mean an hour. Sha'ah can mean a moment. Can mean 1 moment. So if it's 1 moment, that a person is, even if it's an hour, that a person is sitting and refraining. Whereas if it's an entire day or an entire month or shana, so then that's going to be a much greater challenge, and it's going to be a much greater merit. And therefore he says, in other words, why do the not negative mitzvot correspond to the days of the year? That corresponds to the factor of time. Because the more time that passes, the more difficult it is not to have fulfilled not to have transgressed that love. And therefore, and that's why for the negative mitzvot that are connected to time, to days of the year. What about the positive? He says, when it comes to positive mitzvot, so what is going to increase the merit, what is going to increase the mitzvah that you'll do? So there, when it's about actively fulfilling, it's about actively being engaged in something. Says if a person's just fulfilled something, it comes easily. A person fulfilled the mitzvah to say just with their hand or with their foot. So that's not the same as somebody who's really exerting themselves, their whole body. They've got to run from one place to another. They've got to go and they've got to invest themselves. That's the pasuk that says, Kol atzmotai tomarna, all my bones will praise Hashem. This is, by the way, one of the sources for those who for shochling during davening, right? Kol atzmotai tomarna Hashem mikamocha. V'lachein tali ha'asin be'avalim she'adam yitarbeh ha'kiyum ve'hazchut. And therefore, when it comes to the positive mitzvot, so those are connected to the Evarim, those are connected to the limbs, to the fact that a person gets up and goes and performs them. Okay, so that is an interesting parallel comparison which the Aruch LaNer makes. The Gemara then continues, okay, and it says, so what's the source? This is Ma'ikra, we're on the last line now of the Amud. Ma'ikra, what is the pasuk? Torah tziva lanu Moshe Moshe Keilat Yaakov. Right, just rolls off the tongue, even though the Gemara here doesn't quote the last 2 words, but it says Torah tziva lanu Moshe Moshe. So Torah b'gematria over the page now. Torah b'gematria shit mea v'chatzrei. Torah in gematria is 611. Don't take my word for it. You can work it out. Right, Taf is 400 and Reish is 200, so that is 600, and Vav is 6 and Hey is 5, so that's 611. So that's 611. We said 613. So it says Anochi v'lo yelach amimnag v'lashmanu. So it says Torah tziva lanu Moshe. So Moshe told us about Torah till the 611. But there were another 2 mitzvot, which were Anochi and Lo Yeh, the first 2 of the Aseret HaDibrot, which we all heard, B'bnei Gvora Shmanum. We all heard those directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that is 611 plus 2. That is therefore 613. So just going back to the Aruch LaNer for a moment, he says again something quite interesting. He says in the next piece, B'gmara Evarav Shel Adam. He said, this is the fact that we heard Anochi and Lo Yeh directly from Gvura. Yesh aseh echad v'lo taseh echad sheshamanu pi HaKadosh Baruch Hu be'atzmo. So he says here we have, therefore, there is one positive mitzvah and one negative mitzvah which we heard directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. וכנגדם יש לומר שיש יום אחד שאין לשטן שליטה. Right, so we have Chazal tell us that ועדיין יום הכיפורים. The Satan in Gematria comes to also that comes to 364, and which is one less than 365. So Chazal say there is one day which the Satan does not have any shlita, does not have any dominion, and that day is Yom Kippur. So very interesting. He says this corresponds perfectly. We say there are 365 lotase parallel to the days of the solar year, which is 365. But there is one which is an exception. There is one which is different, which the Satan doesn't have any control over us. Why? Because that corresponds to the one which we heard directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so too, regarding the positive, the other side, he says, that there is a certain bone in the body that does not decompose, and that's where Tchatametim begins from. And then he says, and that is parallels to the one asay, which we heard from Hashem himself. So interesting that the parallels, also that the one exception that we heard from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that parallels the one different thing as well. Now, something which comes up here with these numbers of the Chofetz Chaim writes about this in Shvat Lashon, and there are others who talk about it as well. The idea that the different mitzvot which a person does correspond to the different limbs of the body. And he says, so he writes that if a person failed to fulfill any of the mitzvot, in a certain sense, person will be missing that limb, so to speak. Spiritually, person will be deficient in that way. The question that everybody asks, is that it's impossible to fulfill all 613, right? We know that it's the negative mitzvot maybe, but in terms of the positive mitzvot, they don't all apply to everybody. Some apply to a king, and some apply to a Kohen, and some apply in different places, in different circumstances. And it's not saying that everybody can fulfill. So Rav Zilberstein has here in the Chashukei Chemed interesting discussion as follows. He says, here is the question, Chashukei Chemed, which is Rav Zilberstein's Sefer, going through each page of Shas, going through different questions and shaylas which come up, which are related to the discussion on that particular daf. So he says here, related to the study of Ramach Mitzvot, he says, Yachol lazol hazaken laniach tefillin, or hazaken laset kapayim b'meivcha. מי שיכול לעזור לאדם זקן להניח תפילין, או לסייע לזקן כהן אחר, באותו זמן לעלות לדוכן ולשאת כפיו. So person's in shul, and there's two elderly people who need help, and you can only help one of them. He says one of them needs help putting on his tefillin, and the other one is a Kohen, and needs help going up to the Duchan to do Birkat Kohanim. He says, אין לו זמן לסייע בשני הדברים, במאבחה. You can only help one, so who should you choose? So he says, Makkot, which is what we've just learned. Okay, interesting. So first of all, our Gemara says the Girsa that we have says 613 mitzvot were given to Moshe. In the Girsa of, is that the yeah, that's what we have as well. It's Agizah. The Bahag has slightly different Gizah here, where it says Nitztavu Yisrael. When Israel were commanded. Okay, we'll have to see how that works. But in any event, it's the Kshar Mabit. If you say that 613, if you say 613 mitzvot were given to Moshe, so that makes more sense, that Girsa, because 613 mitzvot were given to Moshe, and then he commanded us, and but those which apply to you apply, those which don't. But if you say 613 mitzvot were given to Israel, mashma shachovah kol Yisrael mitzvot, sounds like each one of Israel needs to fulfill all 613. V'kasheh, but that's difficult. So first of all, there are mitzvot which don't apply to an individual, and they apply to the tzibur. Nazir mitzvah. Mitzvot Kohanim Atmeim, and then other mitzvot like Kohanim, etc., which don't apply to everybody. Mitzvot Adam Ba'al, which not everybody is going to be able to fulfill. For Tiretz, והיות וישראל נכנסו אויבים זה לזה, והם נענשים ונתפסים זה בעוון זה, אם כן נמצא שכל אדם יכול לקיים כל המצוות. Okay, so he says, first of all, maybe you could say, by the principle of arvut, the principle that kol Yisrael oivim ze bazeh, everybody is responsible for one another, and therefore, and everybody's going to be responsible, and everybody's going to be punished together. So that is why each individual has an interest in helping everybody else fulfill the mitzvot, and that is the way that you fulfill your mitzvot too. When you do that so that other people can fulfill, it's considered as if you yourself have done the mitzvah. That's why we know this is a halachic principle discussed many times. Arvut, so kiddush, for example, person's already made kiddush for themselves on Shabbat, but there's somebody else who's not made kiddush. They go back and they can say it for them again, and they can say the brachot again, and it's not a bracha levatala. Why? Because if you haven't fulfilled your mitzvah, so I haven't fulfilled my mitzvah either. Right? You hear this idea, by the way, it comes up a lot nowadays. People say, "Well, why do you care what I do? Well, why should it affect you?" We see that we're all affected. We're all affected by one another. Obviously, a person shouldn't. There should be no coercion, and we shouldn't force other people to do what they don't want to do, and it's meant to be voluntary, etc. But that's the idea of arvut kol Yisrael oivim ze bazeh. And then he says, "So lefi zeh yesh makom la'adif l'asiyah lakohen b'nesiat kapayim kegon." So he says, if the person is who's helping is a Yisrael, maybe we'd say that it's better to go and help the Kohen with Birkat Kohanim. Right? Why? Because he says mitzvah tefillin makem yishal b'gufo. The mitzvah of tefillin, he's going to have the opportunity to fulfill anyway. Ilu nesiyat kapayim. But how is a Yisrael going to fulfill the mitzvah of Birkat Kohanim? He can't. It's not his mitzvah. The only way he can do it is by helping the Kohen to fulfill it. And therefore he says, so maybe it's better if he only can help one of them, that he could go and help the one who is doing the Birkat Kohanim, because then he will have an extra mitzvah to add to his list that he can tick off. He's done of the Tariag. And he says, of course, all of that is where there's somebody to help the other one go and put on tefillin. If not, he has to help him because tefillin is a mitzvah chiyuvit, etc. Okay, and then he has another question here. Rav Zilberstein, he says, Adam yachol lekarev yodi letorah mitzvot, kohen Yisrael v'et shnehem lo yachol. It's mi adif. Okay, I don't know exactly what the circumstance would be, but he says theoretically you can bring somebody closer to Torah mitzvot, but you can only help one person, and one of them is a Kohen and one of them is a Yisrael. So he says, interesting. He says, Yesh la'adif ta Kohen al pi HaMishnah b'Orayot Daf Yud Gimel ta Kohen kodem l'Yisrael hatzana. The Gemara over there, or the Mishnah in Orayot talks about the order of priority. You can only save one person. So it says that a Kohen comes before Israel. And he says, he says, what difference does it make if it's physical or spiritually saving them? That's the one you should save. And he says, he says, like a Kohen who's not fulfilling mitzvot is going to transgress more isurim because he has more prohibitions which he has to fulfill, which he has to refrain from, which he's not doing. He might come into contact with dead bodies, he says, but I'll give you another reason why you should rather say help the Kohen. Says these additional mitzvot, which this Kohen is now going to fulfill, you as the Israel would not have fulfilled them otherwise. But now you are going to fulfill them. In other words, by the fact that he did them in your schut, that is a way that you have done those extra mitzvot. Okay, so that is a few words about this idea of 613 mitzvot. Now that we've gotten up to 613, we're going to go and we're going to try and reduce the number. That is what the Gemara is going to do for the rest of the staff. It's going to show us that in later generations, different Nevi'im or different came to Yisrael and they reduced it, right? Say Moshe Rabbeinu gave us 613 mitzvot. He didn't invent them himself. But then it says that going down in the generations, so David HaMelech said there are only 11, and then Shav said that there are only 6, and so eventually Habakkuk came and said there's only 1. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean throughout the generations that we are taking away, that we are removing the mitzvot that we are obligated in, and that we no longer have to fulfill them? No, it does not mean that. Clearly, and none of these Nevi'im, just as a Navi does not have the authority to add mitzvot to the Torah, also does not have the authority to take away mitzvot from the Torah. But have a look over here at the Rivan. So we're on Daf Kaf Daled Amud Aleph, on the last Daf of Masechet Makkot. And the Rivan over here, about 4 lines down, says, he says, Shebatchila Hayut Tzadikim. In the earlier generations, they were tzaddikim, they were righteous. And they could receive they could accept upon themselves all mitzvot of many mitzvot. I guess they could focus on many different mitzvot. But when it comes later to the late generations, they were not as righteous. And if they tried to fulfill everything, this is what we say, tafasta meruba, lo tafasta. You try and focus on too much, you're not going to be able to do it. Uba David ve'emidam v'chulei, kedei she'yizku, im yekaymu chatzah mitzvot halalu, that at least they should fulfill these 11 mitzvot. V'chen kol sha'a dorot shamata ochin umema'atin oto. In other words, it's going out and it's extracting principles, the things which they have to focus on. You can't, obviously you have to fulfill everything, but human nature is that a person is not able to focus on everything and to fulfill all the things that they have to. So at least give certain basic precepts and certain basic principles and focus on those in order to fulfill them, in order to be zocher lechei olam haba. Right? When you try and focus on too much, you're not able to focus on anything. It's actually interesting that the word priority, we talk about priorities all the time. When the word priority actually was first introduced into the English language, there was no plural form. It was just a singular word, priority. There's no such thing as priorities, because once you have more, then when everything is a priority, nothing is a priority, right? And we find later on, we don't have this in the Gemara, but later on, Days the Rishonim, we have literature of Ikarim. What are the central tenets? What are the most important principles that we have to focus on? So the Rambam very famously comes along with it, and he writes his Yud Gimel Ikarim. I don't know, maybe based on this Gemara. That's where the idea comes from. But there are 13, because 613 maybe is too many to remember. Okay, 613 are mitzvot, or practical things which we have to do. The 13 Ikarim are fundamentals of faith. There's all literature about that, about why that was written and when that was written. But the Rambam comes and he says there are 13 things to focus on. Rav Yosef Albo writes Sefer Karim, he says not 13, he says just 3. And there are 3 that you have to focus on. In any event, so the Gemara says that David HaMelech came and he established for them 11 things, 11 mitzvot to focus on. I suppose 11 sort of ikarim principles. Again, this does not mean that the rest of the mitzvot we don't have to fulfill, but it means that really everything is based on these principles as well. So it says the Gemara now in the 3rd line. It says, Ba David ve'emidan al achatzis. So came David HaMelech and he said these 11 principles. What are they? Dichtiv, quote from the pasuk. This is in Tehillim, right? It says, Mizmor David, Hashem mi yagu ba'alecha, mi yishkon ba'al kodshecha, holech tamim u'poel tzedek, v'domer emet ve'uvavo, lo ragal al leshono, lo asa el ra'a, v'chepa lo nasa al klovo, nivza b'einav, nimas ve'et yirei Hashem yichabed, נשבע להרע ולא ימיר כספו ולא נתן בנשך ושוחד על נקי לא לקח עושה אלה לא ימות לעולם. Okay, so that is from Tehillim. That is from Tehillim Tetvav, and there David HaMelech tells us, and now the Gemara is going to lay out each one of these 11 principles. What are they and who are they referring to, and what precisely does it mean? These are we're going to see different examples tzaddikim who excelled with these things. So we said, who will dwell in your tents, right? Who will live on your mountain? In other words, who can come into Har Beit Hashem? Who is the one who can fulfill all these things? So holech tamim, somebody who walks wholeheartedly, upoel tzedek, and who performs justice, v'dover emet bilvavo, and speaks truth in one's heart. What does it mean, speak truth in one's heart? We'll see in a moment. Lo ragel al leshono, lo asa l'ra'eu ra'a v'chapa lo nasa al krovo, did not do bad to one's fellow, and did not do cause shame to one's relatives. Nivzeh beinav is sort of humble in one's eyes. Nimas. Okay, so let's and it continues. Let's go on, and we'll see one by one what the Gemara says about these things. So, and then just at the end, when it says Oseh Eileh, the one who has done these, lo yimot leolam, will never falter forever. Okay, so we'll see what the Gemara is going to come back to that line at the end as well. So the first one is holech tamim, somebody who is tamim. Right, in modern Hebrew, tamim is somebody who's a little bit naive, but it means tamim is somebody who is wholehearted, who is innocent. We know it says, for example, Yaakov was an ishtam yoshevu alim, right? So lomer lamolech tamim ze Avraham. That refers to Abraham. Dichtiv hitalech lefanai v'yeh tamim. Hashem says to Abraham, walk before me and be complete, be wholehearted with me. It also says, we know in Parashat. In the Torah, it says, Tamim tiyeh Hashem Elokecha, right? You'll be Tamim, you'll be wholehearted, pure of heart with Hashem. Okay, that was number one. Number two, Poel Tzedek. One needs to be a worker with justice, with righteousness. Kagon Abba Chilkiyahu. Street named after him, right? What does that mean? Poel Tzedek on Abba Chilkiyahu. So Abba Chilkiyahu was a great tzaddik in the times of the Gemara, and the Gemara Masechet Tanya tells us that when Abba Chilkiyahu was working for somebody, so he wouldn't even say shalom. He wouldn't answer back to people who asked how he was, in order not to waste any time from his work. Imagine that nowadays. If, right, we were so conscious of time to the extent that even just going back and saying hello. But the point is that one fulfills their requirements and works with righteousness, with justice, performing their duties as they meant to. V'dover emet bilvavo, somebody who speaks truth in one's heart. So that is like Rav Safra. Kagon Rav Safra, like Rav Safra. What did Rav Safra do? Why is he called Dover Emet Bilvavo? So here, have a look at the Rivan. Rivan tells us a story. So Rav Safra, B'she'iltot Rav Acha, it's told, V'achi hava uvda Rav Safra. This was the case with Rav Safra. Hayalo chefetz echad limkor. He had a very valuable object available to sell. Uba adam echad lefanav b'sha'a shaya kol kriyat shema. Somebody came to him at the time that he was reading kriyat shema. These things always happen at the time he's saying kriyat shema. So then is what happened. Amar lo tein li achefetz bekach. The person said to Rav Safra, give me this, sell me this object for a certain amount of money. Bekach v'kach tamim, for such and such an amount. V'lo anau mipnei shaya kol kriyat shema. Rav Safra did not answer because he was saying kriyat shema. He thought, why isn't he answering? He's driving a hard bargain. He said, I'll give it to you for 100 zuz, whatever it was. If Safra doesn't answer, he thinks, he must want more money. He says, fine, I'll give it to you for 200. Well, he didn't realize that he was saying kriyat. So he thought he didn't want to give it to him for this amount. And therefore he increased the price. So he said, fine, give it to me for, I said 100 before, give it to me for 200. Now, what would you do in such a situation? Right? You don't have to answer. But I think that most people, okay, the guy's offered 100, now he's offered 200, fine, we'll get to 200. It's got a good business deal here. Not Rav Safra. Right, he says, after he had finished, he said, take it, but for the first price that you said to me. Wow. He says, because that was in my mind, I'd intended to give it to you for the first price. The reason I didn't say anything was not because I was trying to drive the price up, not because I was saying no, but I was in the middle of Grat Shema. I couldn't answer, but that was what I intended. Even though he hadn't actually, if he had taken the higher price, would he have, technically speaking, done anything wrong? Did he lie? No, he didn't lie. Did he tell him that he wanted that he would give it to him for that price? Did he sign a contract? No, didn't do anything. But in his mind and in his heart, he knew that he was willing to give it up for the lower price. Therefore, he would only take the lower price. That is dover emet bilvavo. Okay, so that's number 3. Number 4, lo ragel al leshono ze Yaakov Avinu. Okay, this is meaning Yaakov Avinu did not want to. He didn't want to. Here we just spoke about dover emet bilvavo. That's about speaking in one's heart. But he didn't want to say anything with his lips either. He didn't want to lie. Right, this is Yaakov regarding the brachot. Okay, what happened over there? Yaakov in Nechtiv Ulai Yemosheni Avi Vayiti Be'enav Kimtater. So I'm sure we all remember the story, right? You have Yaakov and Esav, and Yitzchak is approaching the end of his life. He's going to give the brachot. Now, Esav is the firstborn, and he's going to get those brachot. So Rivka calls in Yaakov and tells him the whole plan, and says, "You have to go in, and you have to receive the brachot from your father." So Yaakov, who is an Ishtam Yeshevu Aleim, and who epitomizes the midah of truth, does not want to go in this whole. Doesn't want to go along with this whole scheme. He doesn't want to go and have to lie to his father. We all remember he goes in and Yitzchak says, "Who are you?" And he says, "Anochi Esav b'chorecha." Right? And Rashi says, what did he say? He said, "Anochi, it's me, and Esav is your firstborn." Right? And that is a somewhat unsatisfying answer, I'm sure. There's much that we can say about this whole idea. I'll just say very, very briefly, Rav Dessler has a fundamental piece talking about the whole story with Yaakov and Esav and talking about the brachot and the truth and the so seeming deception or trickery that takes place. And he, based on the Sefer Yereim, who's one of the Rishonim, he says we have to redefine, we have to understand what emet and sheker means, what truth and falsehood, right? Truth does not necessarily mean just that the words that one says are an accurate description of the facts, but truth represents something far greater. And in this situation, since Yaakov, it's a long piece and needs to be studied fully. I'm not really doing it justice in 2 minutes, but just our regel achat. He says that the fact that Yaakov really was the one who was meant to receive those brachot, and ultimately that was truth. That the fact that Yaakov should receive them. But in any event, the way that this had to come about, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky also has a piece where he says, a beautiful idea. He says each one of the avot had their nisayon. We know that the Mishnah Avot says that Asra nisyonot was Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu went through 10 nisyonot, 10 ordeals. Each one of the avot went through ordeals. And for each one, and really in truth, each one of us in life goes through ordeals. The ordeal is when you have to go against that which comes naturally, and you have to go against that which comes easier. The Gra, the Gaon Vilna says, our entire purpose in the world is to break our midot, to fight against that which comes obviously and naturally and easily and instinctively. So Avraham Avinu, his midah was the midah of chesed. So his nisyonot were where he had to go against the midah of chesed, right? And we see it, he has to expel his son, Ishmael, he has to take his son, Yitzchak, and he has to offer him up as a korban. Right? At the end of the day, he doesn't have to go through with it, but it's the opposite of midat chesed, but he has to do it because HaKadosh Baruch Hu said so. And the question is, do you do things because that's just what you do, and those are your habits, and that's your instinct, or you do things because you want to fulfill the will of Hashem, even when it's not so easy? So Yaakov Avinu, his midah is the midah of truth. His ordeal is that he goes and has to do something which, at least on the surface, seems like falsehood. But yeah, so we see. So Yaakov says, maybe he will go. He goes in with the goat skins so that to make him seem hairy, just like Esav. And he says, but nonetheless, he says, maybe my father will feel me, and maybe he'll know that this is all a scheme, that it's not really that I'm not really Esav. Right, so the Rivan Aviyah says, "Lo ragal al shono v'chulei, lo ratza l'shaker mitchila." He did not want to lie. Shamar ulai mosheni avi. Ela she'imo hichrichato v'al pi hadibur. But rather his mother forced him to do it. And this was al pi hadibur. This was, she had prophetic insight that this was what needed to be done. Dichtiv alai kilatcha b'ni u'metargaminan alai itama b'nevuah. So Rivka says to Yaakov, she says, alai kilatcha b'ni. She says, if there'll be a curse, don't worry, it's not on you, it's on me. Okay, you can ask, what about the fact we learned some time ago? There's a concept of ein shaliach lidvar vera. Ordinarily, that doesn't work such a svara. You're doing something wrong. You can't say, "Oh, it's on me." You're doing it. But over here, it was different because it was revealed in prophecy, and this is one of the places in the Targum Rashi quotes the Targum Onkelos. You see the Targum over there. That's how he translates. He says, "Alai it amar b'nevuah." Does not say that in the pasuk, but Onkelos adds that in, that it was said to me via nevuah, via prophecy. So the Gra points out over here as well something interesting, that when it says ulai yemusheni avi, the word ulai means perhaps, and the Gra says that actually that's the wrong word here. Grammatically, in context, it should say pen yemusheni avi, meaning lest my father will. Why does it say ulai? So the word ulai, these are two words for maybe, right? Ulai means perhaps, but generally in a positive sense, whereas pen is lest in a negative sense. Meaning when you don't want something to happen, you say pen. When you want something to happen, you say ulai. So we see from here that actually when Yaakov Avinu was saying ulai mosheni avi, he's saying maybe my father will discover me, meaning maybe I want him to know, and I want him to reveal the truth, because it's so foreign to me to have to go and to lie and engage in this falsehood. We see it as well with in Pashat Chai Sarah with Eliezer, Eved Avraham. Right, when Avraham sends Eliezer to go and find a wife for Yitzchak, and Eliezer says, "Ulai lo tovei isha lechet le'acharai." Maybe the woman will not come back with me. He's saying ulai. He's saying maybe I hope that she won't come back with me. Why? Because Chazal said Eliezer had a daughter, and he wanted his daughter to marry Yitzchak, but that was not that was not Abraham's intention. That was not Hashem's plan either. Okay, so that is the idea there of ulai mosheni avid. So that is Yaakov Avinu. That is going to that. I think that was number 4 of the 11 principles which David HaMelech laid out for us. Okay, I think we'll stop there. That's a good place to end for now on number 4 of 11. We'll carry on with the rest of them tomorrow. And wishing everybody a wonderful day.
Thank you very much. Bye, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Cheers, Rabbi.